Comparative analysis is all about weaving together the different meaning. A text might mean one thing and it's created for a purpose, but everything in life relates to something else. So you'll often see that I make references. I make references to something I say is you're going to need a tray. Now that is to do with a thing I watched online years ago. Natashka is disabled, and sometimes, actually, pretty much everyone in this house is disabled in some way. And sometimes we hobble around the house, like holding onto walls and sometimes hard to walk. I say, okay, are we having a Malfoy day? And now, someone who has just watched Harry Potter, sure, you're going to be like, okay, Malfoy day, that doesn't make sense. Why does hobbling around look like a Malfoy day? But the reason I call it a Malfoy day is because I'm not referencing Harry Potter, I'm referencing a Very Potter musical. So a Very Potter musical is a parody of Harry Potter. That is what I think of when I see someone hobble around. Why do we compare text? What are your thoughts? The thing is, if we have a text on its own, analyzing just that text is actually quite difficult because we don't know really what to identify necessarily yet. Comparative analysis, I would say, is actually much easier than normal text analysis as you would get in question 2 because you have some kind of starting point. You're not starting with a blank canvas. So the reason it helps us to, in this thing, part of the process is comparative analysis, is because it lets us compare things, but it also shows that we have an understanding of the genre. It's really our opportunity to explore the differences in genre and stuff like that. The reason it's nice to compare text, I think, is because we get to explore the diversity between the text. Okay? So the endless combination of words and structures convey meaning. They bring emotion, they bring perspective. So in comparative analysis, we learn to appreciate all of these nuances. We learn to understand that every text has its own flavor. But more than that, we get to see how different writers will sometimes achieve the same thing using different techniques or the same technique in different ways. So it's not just about spotting the similarities and the differences. It's really about going into the depths of language so that we can look for the ways that the writers are crafting their work. We want to understand why an author chooses a metaphor over a simile, why they might choose some kind of choppy sentence structure. It's really about getting to the crux, the heart of the text. I've got a bit of a method. I call it the cross-pollination method. If we go back to my imagery of bees that I love so much, bees cross-pollinate, and what they do this by taking the pollen from one plant, one flower, and they move it to another flower, and they're not doing it on purpose. They're not like, okay, I'm going to take a bundle of pollen and put it there. But them touching the one flower and then touching the other flower actually brings greater depth. When we are analyzing, when we're cross-pollinating, if I see in one text, this thing is interesting, I can go look for its counterpart in a different text. I can go look for something similar in a different text and say, okay, so I see this in this text. How can I use it? How can is it available in the other text? And so let's say I see that the one text is using a lot of sibilance. Okay. Sibilance is your repetition of your S sound. And I'm like, okay, well, why are they using sibilance? I'm not really sure. Then I look at the other text and I'm like, okay, the other one's using a lot of plosive. Why are they using a lot of plosive sounds? I'm not sure. But then I carry on thinking about it and I'm like, okay, well, the one with sibilance actually, it changes the flow, it changes the rhythm, all of the sibilance. The sibilance makes it flow almost musically. Whereas the one that uses a lot of plosive sounds like p and b will be a lot more boisterous, it'll be a lot harsher, and a lot more unapologetic. By looking at those two things, by comparing them, I have identified something which I wouldn't previously have identified. And so it kind of opens me up to whole new ideas, to new concepts, which I wouldn't have seen before. We're looking at our text, we're looking at our tone, we're looking at our style. Looking at the different texts, looking at them comparatively, really opens us up to new things that we wouldn't have previously identified. Some questions that you should be asking while you're comparatively analyzing. Okay. Number one, what is the purpose of the text? Is it to persuade? Is it to entertain? Is it to inform? Is it to provoke thought? And then to what end? How are they doing this? But I just want you to answer the question, what is the purpose of the text? Who is the audience? Are we looking at fellow bees of the hive? Are we looking at our peers? Or are we trying to charm the butterflies? Are we trying to speak to someone of a higher social standing to us? Someone of a lower social standing? Are we looking to speak to someone who can relate to what we're saying or not? And we're looking at someone else's text, obviously. And we're looking at our own text because we're comparatively analyzing our own text. And then we're looking at what linguistic features stand out. Are there any vivid metaphors? Are there any puns? Is there any intricate imagery? And you use this as your starting point. Not your end point, but you use this as your starting point. How is structure contributing to the overall impact? What structural factors can you see? Is it like organized neatly? Is it like a pruned rose bush? Or is it more like a meadow of daisies? Is it chaotic like I am? And then what is the tone? And so these elements that I'm looking at aren't necessarily the language features that you're identifying. But the tone is created through the language use. The purpose is achieved through the use of language, form, and structure. The audience is directly interacted with for in a specific way to interact with that audience. Imagine if I came here and I spoke in these and thous. Would that be accessible to you? I don't think so. It might be fun. Do it sometime. But these are our tools that we're using. Now, while those are our tools, we need to dig a little bit deeper. I've given you two texts. But let's look at two different passages, pretend passages. So let's look at a speech by a renowned environmentalist. And another is just from a popular blog about urban beekeeping. So at first glance, you'd think maybe they're about bees, but that's just a starting point. The environmentalist is probably going to use some formal language. They're going to use lengthy sentences. They're going to use a tone of urgency. There's going to be a rhythm to their word. It's going to be like an ebb and a flow. And the reason that would be is to emphasize this importance. It gets the audience into almost a trance-like state so that they listen to what she's saying. So she might then use metaphors of destruction and rebirth. We might look at a phoenix rising from the ashes of a scorched earth. But then if you were writing an urban beekeeping blog, it might have more conversational language. It might have some witty aside. The sentences would be shorter. The sentences would be punchier. It would be like a buzz of the bee's wing. So humor would probably also be used in the blog post where it wouldn't be used in the environmentalist speech. Might be, but it's less likely to be a major factor. So the blog, instead of having metaphors of destruction and rebirth, is probably going to have something more lighthearted, like puns or some lighthearted anecdote. So from there, if we compare these passages, I think I should find some similar things for you to look at. We'll see how the tone would command respect and convey seriousness. Actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to give each of you the task of writing the text, and then you can compare. Because I mean, that would be fun. Now, while the blogger will have a laid-back style, and it will invite the reader into a friendly conversation, we're going to see metaphors, but we're probably going to see metaphors in both, but both will serve different purposes. So while the metaphors of the environmentalist is going to, the things that the environmentalist says, going to create devastation and hope, the blog post is likely to create humor and relatability. Over and above that, we've got the structure, and the structure tells a story. The structure tells a story of a well-organized hive in the environmentalist. But if you're looking at like a blog post, this person is writing as they think of things. And it's going to be more chaotic. Each section is probably going to stand on its own. It's not going to be well crafted as if it's a UN speech. It's going to be differently crafted, well crafted, but differently crafted. Comparative analysis we don't just compare texts. It's not written stuff always. We can compare adverts. We can compare films. We can look at the differences in conversations, the differences in the conversations you have with me versus your parents. What you need to be doing in everyday life is looking at how are people communicating their message? How are they delivering what they're saying? And what impact does it have on the readers? What impact does it have on the listeners? The way that adverts are created, when I was a kid, adverts are very different to what they are now. Now, a lot of the advertising I see is from, what are those people? Influencers. And it's very, very different. Comparative analysis is not meant to be this dry academic exercise. It's supposed to be a dynamic process, and it can be very, very enjoyable when you don't approach it as homework, but rather as a way to explore culture, as a way to explore how people think, how the world works. Because if I can understand how one text is different from another text, I can understand how one person is different from another person. And I apply psychological understanding to a lot of what I do, philosophy and stuff like that. But we need to be aware of the fact that comparative analysis goes much further than just the bare basics. So in our next thing, I'm going to just look at what is the different terminology we would use and how would we explore that terminology.